everyone, welcome to our mid-June bonus little episode. Interesting stuff in here for you to listen to. Enjoy. I wanted to make a brief mention about the fact that winter solstice happens in June. This year it's going to be the 21st of June. It's the shortest day of the year. And Lou and I always celebrate the 21st or 22nd of June because from that moment forth it seems that we notice that the birds all become a whole lot more active. They start changing from using contact calls to using mating calls and trying to impress each other, and we begin to see nesting behaviour. The ravens in particular will start quite early to, fly around with sticks in their beaks, setting up nests and things like that. But one of the things I realised when I thought about it is that many of our animals are nocturnal, and so for them the winter solstice is actually kind of bad news. They really like long nights. They can be out foraging for much longer during the long winter night. And so it's not always good news for everybody. I also learnt that in other parts of the world, I didn't know this. This is one of those, I'm embarrassed to admit that I didn't know this until I reached a certain age. Their seasons don't start on the first of the month, but in Europe and America, Canada, many places, their seasons change at the solstices and at the equinoxes. You're making faces at me. You come from UK. When did your summer and winter start? Was it on a date?
We never had a summer in the UK.
My understanding is that Australia is unusual for starting on the first of the month, and that
I don't really know. I don't know is the answer. I don't think I was tuned in those days. That in those early days when I was in the UK, all I knew was that it was cold and grey, and it did warm up a little bit sometimes in July and August, and it got a bit windy in September and October, and the rest of the time it was just freezing cold and pouring rain.
And so
I didn't like the weather in the UK.
I also learned that quolls breed from May to July, and that antechinus breed in the second half of winter. They're stimulated by the increase in daylight during the second half of winter. So many animals sense almost immediately from the solstice that things are looking up.
Yes.
And good times are ahead, and they start to get into it.
Yes, they know what's coming.
Yeah.
Instinctively.
Yeah, that's right. So and I read that birds actually sense the difference in the length of the day by the amount of light it's perceived within their skull. Their skull is fine, and the sunlight penetrates the skull and provides a message to their brain somewhere.
I think I have heard that actually. There's so much we don't know still. There's still so much to learn. But we are learning faster now. We are learning faster. People have realised, I think, that if we understand more about animals, we can do more to save them.
That's right. That's right. Lou, we're just at the what they might call the fag end of autumn, but you and I are both quite interested in the idea of making good use of autumn leaves. Tell us what we can do with all of our excess autumn leaves.
Yes, well, again, this is a feature of the Highlands that we are so lucky with our deciduous trees.
Lucky?
Well, when it comes to leaf mould, yes.
Right.
Because leaf mould, the leaves of the deciduous trees, the maples and the oaks and the poplars, these trees have leaves that are, compared with our normal gum leaf, extremely soft.
Mm.
And so they will break down into soil very, very much quicker than, say, a gum leaf will, which is, as you know, quite
they just hang around on
tough.
The top of the soil. Yeah.
That's right. So we have that advantage that we have an opportunity to produce actually an absolute top quality soil conditioner through breaking up our leaves and then piling them up. There is a downside. The downside is it takes a long time to make a beautiful, beautiful compost. Longer than ordinary compost. And you keep them separate from the compost. And it's best if you have them in a shady spot and a moist spot. And they will just sit there and rot down. Keep them wet if you go through a really dry period. Wet them or toss them around so that the wetter ones underneath come to the top. But 2 or 3 years later, that heap will look like the finest, most beautiful, best structured soil you could ever wish for. Better than compost.
Better than compost.
Better than compost because it's so fine. And people use it in seedling mixed. So that has to be a very sort of fine kind of soil.
And nutritious, I guess. So this is called leaf mold?
It's not nutritious, no. You don't want a high nutrition soil for seedlings.
Oh, right.
Later, yes, but not when they're seedlings. So they're quite low in nutrients, but they're very good in structure. They're very good at water retention. They keep a beautiful, amount of water. You don't have to keep watering like crazy. And they provide a lot of soil life.
This is, when you say we're talking about something called leaf mold.
It's now leaf mold, right?
Once it's broken down, it's
yes,
then
and of course
mold.
It's been broken down. Interestingly, there's a difference between compost and leaf mold. That's why you should keep them separate if possible. I mean, if you can't be bothered or you haven't got room to have piles and piles of stuff, which I quite understand. I'm a bit in that camp. You can put your leaves into the compost, and they will compost down nicely. But if you can, go for a leaf mold mound. Mound them up as much as you can, then leave them, let them stay wet, and be patient. But what's so interesting about this leaf mold is that it is broken down by something different from compost.
Oh, right. Okay, so it's not your worms and stuff.
No, well, basically it's bacteria that breaks down compost.
All right.
But with leaves, they're basically made of lignin. Like all trees basically are made of lignin, which is tougher, really. And so it's fungi that tend to break back to fungi. They're the big breakers up of the leaf structure. Yeah.
Oh, right.
Yeah, so you've got 2 different processes going on there.
Yeah.
And I do remember you mocking me on account of the fact that I was talking about something called amphipods.
The little hoppy things in the ground.
Jumping things.
Yes.
Yes. It just shows that you have never made leaf mould. If you lift up the bottom of the leaf mould where it's all moist and wet, you will find the amphipods, or perhaps I should call them landhoppers.
Right.
And they just spring up. They're laterally compressed. They look like tiny shrimps, but they're so small that you'd have to get them really under a microscope to have a look at them, or at least a good hand lens. Yeah. And they jump like springtails.
Right.
And they jump and jump. And when you lift the mold, there's all these things jump up.
Oh, okay.
So they're just one of the other things that's breaking down that leaf mold.
Right.
Yeah.
So I have done it. Maybe I have not looked sufficiently meticulously underneath. But the way that I've made it this year is that I've just created a circle, a ring, with wire. Oh, Lou's showing me an illustration of an amphipod. I've created a ring with wire, and I'm just chucking my autumn leaves into that ring, and I will be turning it over from time to time.
That is good way to do it. Put it in, some people talk about putting it in a plastic bag and digging holes in the bottom of it, but I think that's pretty yucky, and you're left with a indisposable plastic bag.
Yeah. Yeah. Lou, you've been telling me that you've been seeing straw-necked ibis around, and you think we should keep our eyes peeled for them?
Yes, well, it was that very day when I was at that lovely property that we saw in the sky, a long way away, what would have been 50 or 60 birds.
In a group?
In a group, flying. Now, they were at considerable distance, But there is no doubt in my mind what they were. They were straw-necked ibis.
50 or 60?
Really a lot.
So were they in a V shape or in a cluster?
No.
No, not
No,
either.
they weren't. Well, because I know where you're going with the V shape. Sunbirds, and certainly the white ibis, they do tend to fly that way, and a lot of other birds do. All the ducks and the geese, they tend to fly in V's for aerodynamic.
The pelicans too, I think.
Yeah, it's a sort of aerodynamic device. If you're just behind somebody who's already flapping the air, you don't have to flap as hard. A bit like being on the back of a bicycle or something. These guys weren't actually. They were in a cloud. And I have noticed just recently, because we've had a very, very significant rain episode, and there's water all over the highland at this time. And they're on the move. I've just noticed that the straw-necked ibis are everywhere. Now, there are more than one species. Straw-necks are one species, but we actually in Australia have 3.
Ibis.
Ibis.
Yeah.
And the one that people refer to very rudely, in my view, as bin chickens.
Yeah.
I think that is a very derogatory, racist remark. Just because you're such a mucky...
It's speciesist.
It's speciesist. Well, all right. Just because us humans are such sloppy people and leave all our refuse in bins, they very wisely go to investigate if there's anything left. That's all. But those are the big white ones. You'd see them in the city quite a bit, in Sydney, and they're very common.
So just for people who don't know the first thing, which
About
would have been
ibis.
mean a while ago, ibis are the birds with the, I'm resisting the temptation to gesture, with the really long beak, which is what they call decurved, curved downwards.
Yes, very long and curved. All the ibis have that. All 3 species have that. Very small heads, quite big bodies, and long legs.
Necks. And, long necks.
Toes.
Yeah.
And basically you think of them as being, well, the white ibis you see quite often in estuaries and so forth. They will go river, muddy places. So it helps to have long legs. But they're mostly white with a black sort of skinny head and skinny bill. No, not a skinny bill. A skinny,
which one are you talking about?
I'm talking about the white one. The one
Right. The bin chicken.
No, we're not using that
We're not
term.
saying that anymore.
It's
Exist.
speciesist. Anyhow, they're only cleaning up where we've made a mess. But mostly they get their food out of estuaries and places like that. But the straw-necked ibis are more inland ibis. I'd say they're a little bit smaller, but you can really tell the difference because their backs and their wings are black.
Yes, beautiful, iridescent-y,
If you
bluey
see
black.
them in the sunlight in a paddock, they're just glowing purple, green, blue. That black isn't just black. But, when it's a long way away,
It looks black.
It looks black. And the straw neck is really something also that you probably only see when you're really close, but it's sort of, they've got these long feathers that sort of hang from their neck.
It's almost kind of spaghetti-like in a way.
Yes. Sort of.
Right, you're not entirely in agreement with me there.
Well, so they're more inland birds, and when it rains like this, they're highly migratory. They will go where the rains go because that softens up the land and allows them with those bills, those stout, big, round bills, to probe into the muds, and there they will get out the larvae of beetles. They will take frogs. They will even take, I've heard they will take mice. Little mice, but not that they bury in mud. But you know what I mean? There's a lot of eggs and larvae in that mud that comes to the surface because they're drowning. They're drowning, basically. So that is why I think we're seeing so many of these straw ibis just now in the Highlands.
When you say, we've talked about these before in our years together, and it seems to me that you see them down in Bundanoon much more often than I see them. Oh. And I've had a look at Bird Data and eBird and all the places, and it seems as if the sightings are reducing in number, which I guess is no surprise. But sightings in the kind of Bowral, Mittagong, Moss Vale area are really few and far between. So do you think there's something about Bundy that's attracting them?
Well, there's a lot of cropping land around us. So a lot of paddocks around us. It's more built up around Bowral and Mittagong and things.
We do, occasionally I'll see as an individual on the Bong Bong track, the bike track.
Really? On its own?
Yeah.
Yep.
But that's it.
Right.
Yeah.
No, we see them quite a lot, but I am on the edge of farmland, and that's their preference, I think. They're not so much in the estuaries. They're much more in the drylands, but the drylands when they're wet.
When they're wet. Okay, so everybody look out for straw-necked ibis, and if you see them, consider reporting them on the various different websites, Nature Mapper, iNaturalist, eBird, Bird Data, any of those, because records seem to be diminishing. So another thing that's happening at the moment is that people are telling me that they're seeing rain moths. Rain moths are super special moths. They're massive, that come out sometimes before the rain and sometimes after big rains.
Yes, I did read that they can sometimes, a few can come out before the rain, which kind of confused me because I sort of thought it would be the rain that would soften up the soil, the earth, so that the pupa could wriggle, because it does wriggle out of the soil. And lies on the surface, breaks open and becomes these huge moths, which we thought, didn't we originally? We thought they were hawk moths.
Yeah, but we've done further research.
It took us a while. It took me a while anyhow to realise
yes.
that this is a different family of moths. Some call them swift moths, but rain moths really covers it, because that torrential downpour we had recently at
really
night
brought them out.
It brought them out, and it was like that Greater Glider walk. Do you remember that with our torches and everything, they were all zooming around the place. They were sort of getting in your hair.
And the producer of our show completely failed to take any photos, even though she knew it was going to be the next topic.
Never mind, sweetie. Can't be alert all the time. You probably had your mind on Greater Gliders.
I do have trouble being alert all the time.
But these moths, I thought, well, you know, we're so used now to weather patterns being so unpredictable. But this seems to be a fairly predictable pattern. It's autumn nights with good rain around this time of year, March, April, May. This is when these rain moths come out, and they don't feed. They have no feeding.
No.
They don't have, nice big proboscis like some moths
they
do.
don't have any mouth parts at all.
It's actually a pretty sad scenario for
It
the
is.
adult. It's all right if you're a larvae, because they can live for years underground, eating basically around the roots of gum trees.
Sounds a bit boring to me.
It's a bit boring. I mean, it's a bit boring, but they're probably okay, and they're getting fat. But once you're an adult and you've burst out of that pupa case, which is really long and yellowy brown, I found the pupa case.
Yeah.
Your only job really is to reproduce and die.
That's it. Yeah. 24 hours of getting as much mating done as you possibly can. I am resisting the temptation to use so many other terminologies here.
And then the females, they lay something like 40,000 eggs, and they lay them one at a time as they're flying, and they just fling them. I saw the term bombing.
That's right.
I
saw that too.
They egg bomb the ground, presumably near the gum trees, so that,
in the hope that some might hit a little crevice and find their way down to the roots of the trees.
Yeah, but they are really remarkable, and I'm really delighted that something that is meant to come out at a certain time of year is actually doing what it's supposed to do, because these days everything seems to be so topsy-turvy.
Yep, that's true. And I'm getting a number of reports, particularly at the moment from Robertson and also down at Penrose, of lots of these massive... We need to just describe them a little bit, because even though we're saying big, these are huge, aren't they?
Well, they are quite big. They vary in size a bit, but the ones I was looking at, what's that? They're
Oh, that looks like about 5 centimetres.
6 centimetres, from head to tail, as it were. And then the wingspan's greater. And they come to the windows in their masses.
Yeah. So
when the lights are on inside.
My little note says the wingspan is 16 centimetres. So they're big guys.
They're big. Some of them are really big guys.
Yeah.
And I think, they're brown or grey. They have patterns on them that sort of, I guess, are supposed to act as camouflage, but really they're just fodder for owls and tawny frogmouths and all sorts of animals eat them. I mean, it's a bloodbath, I think, once they come out, really.
Yeah,
if we knew what was really going on that night, we would be quite disturbed. I think, apparently insectivorous bats, very partial to rain moths.
Right. And fishermen would know these as, they call them bardy grubs, I think.
Yeah,
and
I've heard that.
They use them as bait.
Yes, I've heard that. So, but I wondered about that. So
that
go
must be
around
the caterpillar.
Digging them up around the paddocks underneath the gum trees.
Presumably.
Right.
That's something I know.
Those were the days. I sort of kind of think that practice might be a bit hit and miss these days.
Yeah. I think that'd be better to go, more efficient to go to the shop. Okay, I hope you enjoyed that. We'll see you at the beginning of July. Bye. You could say bye too.
Bye.